Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. And you know what? I'm struggling to apply too many of those adjectives to this last weekend of MMA action. Wasn't all that wide. The warehouse wasn't all that wacky. Unless you were an odds maker, I guess, because boy, did they get a bunch of those wrong. And wonderful would be a severe stretch for this last card. Yeah, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. But I'm Robert Winfrey. I'm your host, as usual. So, on the agenda, UFC on ESPN 58. I erroneously listed this as UFC on ESPN Plus 100 last week. Mea culpa. It was the 100th Apex event. Um, Somewhere in my brain, those wires got crossed when I was typing some stuff out. I shouldn't do this when I'm that sleep deprived, I guess. But we'll see. See if that plays out tonight. But yeah, there was that card, which lost two fights during the week. One as a result of other fights moving around, one as a result of weight issues, and was lambasted as a very lackluster card on paper, not only by me, and then in practice turned out to be very, very, very meh, to be charitable. So we will go over that. We will preview UFC on ABC 6. The UFC is in Saudi Arabia for the first time, and we got a new main event. We'll talk about that when we get to that card, but we'll give it a preview. And a few bits and pieces of news from around the week. One big news item that led to a lot of cards being shuffled around and new fights pertaining to UFC 303. So stick around for that. I know other places might open with that because you don't care about the fights, but I have the order in which I do these things, and if you don't care, use the time codes, skip ahead. It's all listed out down there. All right. Any way you can interact with the product is always appreciated. Like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, whatever's applicable to your podcast platform of choice. Y'all know the drill. I think that's going to be it for the preamble. You know what? No, brief thing. I am recording this on Father's Day, so happy Father's Day to all the dads and otherwise paternal figures out there. You are significantly more important than most people will acknowledge as a general rule, and please continue doing what you're doing. I've been blessed with a very good dad, wonderful grandfathers, both my dad's dad and my mom's dad, uh, pretty good uncles, and some other very good male role models in my life throughout the course, especially my young adulthood, and adolescence. So to anyone out there, just please keep doing what you're doing. Fathers and father figures are incredibly important. We have a mountain of sociological data to support that particular claim. Just keep your head down, keep working on it. You're noticed and you're appreciated a lot more than is given credit for. So, happy Father's Day to everyone out there doing that. All right, let's jump into this, shall we? UFC on ESPN 58. So, start at the top. Okay, couple of things here. I went negative. I went 5-6, which I'm not too happy about. But two things. Had the two fights that fell out not fallen out, I would have been positive. Barely. I would have been 7-6. Because I felt very confident in Tiger Ulanbekov getting a win, and I felt very confident in Ikram Aliskerov getting a win. Some of these others, I got to go over uh, which ones I feel I should have gotten right. There's really only, I think, two that once they started and kind of got going, I kind of went, really? What were you thinking? Um, those being Honestly, picking Douglas Silva de Andrade was just a giant. I should have given myself a caveat on that one to change my mind because dude's almost 40 and he's 38. Like, and I respect him to be out there still doing it, but that one I should have known better then. Actually, there's two more on the earlier prelims that kind of bothered me. Um, I should have picked Josephine Knudsen. That I really should have known better on that one. I understand why I went with Yekasaragi over Weston Wilson. Unfortunately, part of my assessment was they're trying to give Saragi, a winnable fight. I forgot to allow for the fact that he's just not that good. And even though Weston Wilson is maybe back when this meant anything as a statement, he's not really a UFC caliber fighter. Back when, again, there was a time, people, when UFC caliber meant something, and now it's, well, you're willing to sign up for the puppy mill, and will you take 12 and 12, and we'll just see how your first 6 fights go. Um, I should not have picked Saragi. He's just not very good. The others, I'm not gonna beat myself up too much about some of them. Fugit over Quinlan, not gonna be mad about. He stand over Armfield. I'm not gonna be mad about that one. That was just kind of a close fight. Let's see. Almeida and Kwamba. Mm, I'm not gonna be mad about it. I think that's it as far as yeah, those three, mostly Johns. That's the big one that's kind of bothering me. That's the one I really should have known better. So again, 5 and 6. Second, in fairness to my to how I've been doing, this is only the second time all year that I have had a negative card. The last one was UFC on ESPN plus 97. See, we're coming up on UFC ESPN plus 100. This was on ESPN. So only twice. We're probably coming up on the halfway point of the year. I mean, I know 6 months, but depending on how you get to the end of, hey, calculate like through the month to the end of December. So if I only had 2 where I went negative thus far as we kind of approach the halfway point of the year. I don't like going negative, but I think I'm okay with that batting average, all things sort of considered. Year to date, that brings me to 166 and 81 with 3 no contests. Yeah, so that's where the prediction, that's where they fell out. And again, if those 2 other fights had gone through, look, Aliskerov got bumped to another fight. He's replacing Khamzat Chimaev for the main event this coming Saturday. So not much could be done about that. We'll talk about that fight more in particular when we get to previewing that card. Tagirul Bekov weighed 129.5 for a flyweight fight. You just can't do that, man. So that fight was called off because he missed weight so badly. And I get it. Those 2 had gone through. Or, in all honesty, if I'd just not been stupid about Miles Johnson, Douglas Silva, de Andrade, I would have been positive. But live and learn, right? Okay. Let's get into some of the more specifics. This was a very, very forgettable card. We've had 3 events. Now, let me just start with this. We've had 3 events with the new gloves at this point. This was the third. And we have had almost no TKO victories. So this started at 302, where there was not a single TKO. There were 3 submissions on that whole card. You had the Almeida rear naked choke over Romanov. You had Kevin Holland messing up Mikhail Aleksejic's elbow, and then you had the Darce choke from Makhachev to Poirier. UFC on ESPN 57 had really only 2 TKOs that actually dealt with punches. Dominic Reyes over Dustin Jacoby, which also featured a knee in the finishing sequence, and then Imavov and Cannonier, which everyone pretty much agrees was stopped early. Imavov did hurt him, but like the other stoppages there, you had the back elbow from Bruno Ferreira, and then the knee to the body from Prates. Not a lot of, I don't know if it's just this is too small a sample size. It's only 30 something fights. It's still too small a sample size to draw any sweeping conclusions. Suffice to say, the trend in that respect is not all that great. The only TKO here was in the main event, and that was injury related. Not necessarily, punches related. So let's get into that. Main event, Tatsuro Taira defeats Alex Perez, knee injury, 259 of the second round. First round, a couple of things were going on here. One has to do with commentary. Commentary was very high on Taira's game, and they kind of ignored a lot of what Perez was doing. When I mentioned in my preview that I thought Taira's striking defense, in particular, like there's not a lot of like dynamic trunk and head movement going on there. I thought the lack of that was an avenue for Perez to attack, and he did. He landed some okay punches, never hurt Taira, but pretending that he wasn't landing is disingenuous. I'm not quite all the way to the Grabaka Hitman on Twitter was very very critical of this bit from commentary. I don't quite agree with Fulani. His assessment of how the striking was going, he was much more in favor of Perez. Perez was busier with his hands, that's true. But I do think it was shortchanged by commentary, just for the record. But anytime they started grappling, Taira had a pretty clear edge. I thought Taira had the first round. His jab was doing okay. He was avoiding a lot of Perez's kicks in particular. Then there's some fun grappling exchanges. Second round, the finishing sequence is interesting. Taira hits a nice single leg kind of against the fence. He gets to the back, and he's done this a couple of times already throughout the course of the fight. He'd gone to the backpack once and had kind of been able to drag things down, but otherwise was using either pullbacks into crab rides or more traditional mat returns. Here he goes to the backpack and goes to a body triangle. Now, as he's standing, Perez is kind of fighting his hands, trying to sling him off the top, sling him around to the side, and he winds up more on the hip than straight up on the back. Taira uses his right leg and goes across. This is the one across kind of the belly of. He's almost on the hip, right? His right leg goes in front of Perez's right leg and kind of grapevines the knee, the left knee. He's sort of doing. I always jokingly call. I heard this takedown kind of referred to first as a cheese donkey, and I refer to it as that now just simply because it amuses me. I think other people call it a broomstick takedown. The long and the short is, have you ever seen some of the little cartoons, where you stick or if you had people who were jerks when you were kids who would do this, they take a stick or something similar and put it between your feet when you're walking. That's kind of what you're doing with your legs. You off balance one, attacking the joint, buckling it, and then pull them the other direction because they can't get their other leg in play. What the difference here was Tyra, the first time he got the back, he had this interesting way of trying to pull things down with the full-on control. He couldn't get his hands together into either the seatbelt position or a legitimate choke attempt. Because if you can do that, you can bring your upper body muscles to bear. Your legs are kind of good for pushing, but you start pulling back with your lats, which are very strong muscles, and you get some more force going backwards that direction. He couldn't get his hands in place, so he was just kind of leaning his body back, like throwing it backwards, which is more trying to off balance than with sudden motion as opposed to some proper technique. But you do what you can with the positions you have. The man absolutely knows what he's doing. I don't mean to imply that when I say doing it with proper technique, very little in fighting is done with full-on proper technique because there's the complication of another human being trying to actively stop you from doing what you're trying to do. But he gets off to the hip a little bit more, grapevines the far leg, and then throws his weight backwards. And now because he's on a hip, he's not going straight back. As they're going down, Perez's right knee folds in a direction it is not supposed to go. Hit the ground. He immediately cries out in pain, and you can't do that. That constitutes a verbal submission. He kind of like starts tapping Tyra. Referee comes over. There's a few punches thrown from back mount, but nothing too serious. Um, yeah, fight's over. Nice little technique. This is not impossible to do. It's a little bit of a rarity. What's the other? I saw somebody do this to Demetrius Johnson during his one run. Let me see if I can remember who that was. Gonna try to find this guy's name because it was. Did I monkey with it? I don't think I put it up on Twitter. Okay, I didn't, which means we're gonna go here, and I'm just gonna hope I recognize the guy's name. It was a weird fight because he got a win, but he had his back taken for a decent amount of time. Was it Wada? I don't think it was Yuya Wakamatsu. I want to say it was Tatsumitsu Wada. It's one of those two, and my hunch is Wada. So you can find that him doing a very, very similar technique, more from straight behind, which is kind of why Demetrius Johnson's knee doesn't suffer near the damage that Perez's does. So gnarly little injury. Nice move from Tyra. Tyra showing off some better takedowns than he has in the past. Appreciate that. Starting to fill out physically. He's young, so that's to be expected. His striking seems to be coming along. The defense and some of the dynamism, upper body movement in particular, still a work in progress. But took a big jump in competition here. He was ranked, I think, 13th, and he beat the number 6 guy, according to the UFC's rankings. So, big jump. Was it him or Almabayev who called out Kai Kara France? I think it was Almabayev. They kind of announced a little bit earlier today Kai Kara France and Steve Urseg, which is a very good fight, by the way. I think that'll be on the Perth card. Very good fight. I don't know if the winner gets the next title shot there. They might. I hate to be the guy predicting doom and gloom for. No, because Tyra wanted Pantoja. It was Almabayev. I'm not going to be the guy to just try and predict doom and gloom for Alexandre Pantoja, but he's coming up on that 35 mark, and there's some talented guys. So Urseg almost had him. Let's not pretend that there weren't. If Urseg had a little bit different decision making in that 5th round, he could have won the 5th round and won the fight. So I'm not saying the next guy that gets Pantoja is going to beat him, but it wouldn't surprise me. I don't think Tyra gets a title shot off of this. He's probably going to have to win one more. I don't know who it will be against. Um, they could do Moreno. I mean, Tyra's wins thus far have all. I think it's just somebody joking that he was like 6-0 against Mexican fighters. Bear in mind, a handful of these guys that he's fought are American, but just with Hispanic or Latin heritage. And it's not a bad like joke, but Moreno would be, I think, the last one if you wanted to continue playing that sort of gag. Um, we don't know what's so we don't quite know what's up here at flyweight. You got Pantoja's champion, then Royval, Moreno, Albazi, Carafronto, Perez was fifth. Makayev, Kopp, I mean, those two are going to fight. Urseg and Carafrance are going to fight. So Tyra's going to shoot up. I imagine fairly highly here. But he's probably going to have to beat maybe the winner of Makayev and Kopp. Amir Albazi's hanging out in third. Tyrant Albazi would be really good. We're just waiting on a few other fights to shake out and to see what direction the UFC wants to take with Pantoja's next fight because, I mean, he's already beaten Moreno, he's beaten Royval, but Royval's got a good bounce back win. I think they tried to do Albazi and somebody and that fell apart due to an Albazi issue. If Carafrance blows the doors off of Steve Urseg, they might try to move him back up. He might get another shot because he fought Moreno for the interim belt. But there's a few moving pieces here. Long story short, I don't believe Tyra gets the next title shot, but he's not that far from it, and he's very good. It's kind of been mentioned recently that there's never been a Japanese UFC champion. Uh, I mean, Sakuraba oddly won one of the tournaments, which was very weird. His fight got stopped. His first fight got stopped prematurely. Then somebody pulled out. Somebody got hurt, and we basically had like the fight where Sakuraba was on the wrong end of an early stoppage. Then they just wound up like fighting again. It was not immediately. I think there was one. I feel like there was one more fight for each of them, but don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I've looked at that event. It's one of those like half-numbered events because it was the UFC's first event in Japan. But they've never had a full-on like UFC champion who's Japanese. Um, Taira might be the one to break that drought. He's absolutely that good. He's got enough time to really refine and hone in his skills. And especially if he fights Pantoja, that's a very tough fight. But things are starting to catch up to Pantoja a little bit, so it's possible. This was a very solid overall performance, even with the slightly weird injury finish. It wasn't a freak injury. Like, Perez didn't just step wrong and his knee blew out. This was a takedown technique executed by Tyra that caused the injury. So I give him credit for that. We don't know right now the specifics of Alex Perez's injury, unless something's been updated. Let me check this real fast. No, I don't think we have a. Yeah, we know he went to the hospital, which is not surprising. He was in a lot of pain. You can see the slow motion. There's something in his knee that gives. But we don't have a specific diagnosis of his injury that's been made public yet. My hunch is something's torn. Just a hunch. Look, it kind of looks like it. So, wish him a speedy recovery. And, as more information becomes available, we'll talk about it here. Yeah, co-main event, Miles Johns. This is all going to start going downhill from here. Um, I mean, your fight of the night was a very sloppy brawl on the prelims. So that gives you any indication of how most of this card went. Miles Johns defeats Douglas Silva de Andrade via unanimous decision, 230-27 to 29-28. Giving Johns the third, I don't think it's correct. First two, yeah, he's got a way of just kind of he's had cardio issues in the past, has Johns. And he's found a way to kind of lull a fight down to the pace he wishes to fight at, and that's working for him. He just landed slightly better shots. His defense was really on point. Silva de Andrade did not hit him very cleanly very often. So, solid enough win for him. Lucas Almeida defeated Timothy Kwamba via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. Really solid stuff from Almeida. Came out looking very sharp. Badly hurts Kwamba in the first round. Isn't able to put him away, but laser-like right hand, really good forward pressure, just solid overall performance out of him. Kind of gives up the third. Kwamba lands a few better punches, starts wrestling him a little bit more successfully. But Almeida needed that. He was like, here's the other thing. One of the other reasons I'm not too terribly upset about being negative on this card. The number of guys on this card who were like 1 and 2 in the UFC was staggering. There were a lot of guys like that, or 2 and 2, 2 and 3, or guys who had were like Jimmy Fleck, who had this several years where he wasn't doing anything. Just just a staggering amount of guys who just don't have a lot of tape on them, who are some of them who are at a stage of development where they can improve fairly rapidly. I'm not upset about being negative on these kinds of cards where we just haven't seen a whole lot of any of these guys or girls. Um, I don't have an infinite amount of time to comb through their regional fight cards. This was one of those. Kwamba stepped in on short notice, up a weight class, and fought to a split decision. Almeida was 0-2, had shown elements of some promise, but the odds were with Kwamba, and I understand why. And Almeida just really showed up. Also, so bantamweights, Brady Heastand defeated Garrett Armfield via rear naked choke, 152 of the third. Heastand had to survive a nasty armbar in the first, but this was actually a really good. My opinion, this should have been fight of the night. A lot of scrambles, a lot of wrestling, some very good. If you want to see how to properly escape body triangles and deal with back attacks, both of these gentlemen put on some very good displays of that skill set in particular. This was not your official fight of the night, and we'll get to what was later. But if I were to recommend something else to watch from this one, these two had something pretty good. A lot of fun scrambles, some good wrestling exchanges. Heastand doing a little bit better in the back control. Then he gets dropped hard in the second. And it would not have been wholly inappropriate for the ref to have stepped in here. Commentary, of course, did the good on the ref not stopping them. Like, do you have money on Heastand or something, guys? I mean, we know, Cruz in particular is always in favor of just guys taking more brain damage. And it's not that I don't understand some of his position, or at least how he arrived at his position, but there was a bit in, I think, this fight. Was it this one or was it Kwamba and Almeida, where it might have been Kwame Almeida, where there was a talking point about, in boxing they probably would have stopped this by now, and I couldn't, but here we are, and we still get to see more head trauma. Like, there's a reason boxing has decided to go the way it has, um, and I don't think it's entirely wrong. But he's stand able to survive, tie things up. When I say you could have stopped this fight at that point, you could have. I don't think it was a horrible non-stoppage. Uh, just for the record, I don't think it was a bad non-stoppage. Then third round, we're getting a little bit more of the same, but Stand is able to just kind of gut through a few positions. Hits a couple of mat returns, and there's one in particular, the last one, that you can just kind of feel the energy leave Armfield. Stand gets his back, gets the choke. Decent enough little fight. Flyweights, few number of flyweight fights on this card overall. Asu Almabayev blanks out Jose Johnson 30-27 across the boards. Johnson actually did okay in the first part of the first round. He's a pretty big flyweight. I think he's like 6 feet tall, which is about my height, fighting at 125. Took Almabayev a bit to kind of figure out the timing and the range before he was able to get his wrestling going. And Johnson had a fairly active guard, had a decent triangle attempt at one point, but it's not that you can't work off your back in MMA, but the problem is, and commentaries talked about this, a lot of people who have gamed out how MMA scoring works and everything. Even if you're very good off of your back, if you're not lights out offensively, you need to prioritize regaining your feet because you are losing when you're on your back. That may not always be fair, but that is reality, as borne out by a bunch of results. And Johnson just got a little bit too complacent playing guard. Then second and third rounds, Almabayev more of the same, just lightning fast takedowns. Took him a while to really pass consistently. Johnson kept going for butterfly sweeps or elevator sweeps. Unfortunately, he was never able to get control over the arms. So while his legs would get inside position, that's kind of what butterfly guard gives you, his arms were never able to pummel in effectively. And to do a good sweep like that, you actually do need your arms in play. Instead, you usually have an overhook on one arm, in which case you're just giving the guy on top an anchor to help not get swept with if they know what they're doing. I mean, if there's a wild skill differential, sure, you can play around with some of the, guidelines and rules about this kind of stuff, but when you're a little bit behind the eight ball, you better be doing things right, and there's a few things that Johnson just wasn't quite doing right. After the fight, Almabayev said he wants to fight Kai Kara France. You know what? Not a bad fight. Honestly, not a bad fight at all. Almabayev looking really good. Lightning, very quick takedowns I mentioned before. Good top control. Dealt with a guy larger than him here fairly effectively. So flyweight it's bolstering the ranks a little bit. It's good to see. Welterweight Adam Fugit defeated Josh Quinlan via split decision, 29-28. Not mad about that. 29-28 either way is fine. Quinlan has a goodish first round, but Quinlan's only tactic for closing distance is just Superman punches or stutter step right hand, stutter step left hook. It's all explosive motion, usually on a straight line. And once Fugit kind of had a feel for that, he just stayed a little bit outside of that range and blasted a lot of kicks home. I think I scored it for Quinlan, but it's basically round 1 Quinlan, round 2 Fugit, and round 3, if memory serves, I can't remember if 2 or 3 was more definitive. I want to say it was 2. It was more definitive for Fugit, and then the third was close enough that I'm not going to be up in arms over giving it either way. On the prelims, Nate Maness defeated Jimmy Flick via unanimous decision, 230-27 and a 29-28. Solid overall work for Maness, had his jab working pretty well. His lack of head movement could be a problem against someone with better offensive strikes than Jimmy Flick. Because he keeps his head very upright as he's working that jab, and there's cross counters in particular, which is not used in MMA nearly enough because guys would rather just swing the overhand instead of just timing across when that jab's coming in or following it back if you're fast enough. Good overall and solid-ish from Maness, even if somewhat forgettable. Your fight of the night, because Dana White loves sloppy brawls, Gabriela Fernandez defeated Carly Judice via split decision, 29-28. I scored this for Fernandez. She had a very good first round. Aggressive, accurate, pretty powerful strikes. I think I gave her the second, and then I gave Judice the third. But the second was relatively... Or was it the first that was relatively close? No, I think it was the second that was relatively close, where Fernandez starts pretty hot, then fades for a good chunk of the middle before kind of rallying back for the last 90, minute and a half. I think she did okay again. In third round, Fernandez has faded pretty visibly, and Judice is able to do pretty good work. And just a lot of striking back and forth. I thought he Stand in Armfield was a better fight, but I have somewhat discerning taste, and Dana White has Dana White's taste. Featherweights, Weston Wilson. I shouldn't say that like this was a bad fight. It wasn't. If you have the time to watch it, it's mildly entertaining. It's certainly not boring. At a bare minimum, this is not a boring fight. There's a fairly high amount of activity from both ladies. Anyway, moving on. Featherweight, Weston Wilson with a triangle armbar over Yeka Saragi. 149 of the first. Not much to this. Saragi comes out and just starts swinging. Gets taken down. Gets clenched up. Is just a little bit out of his depth dealing with some of what Wilson does. Sort of sweeps after being taken down. Wilson grabs triangle, rolls through, triangle armbar. Not a whole lot there. Featherweights, Melchiazel Costa defeated Shailion Nurdanbeke via rear naked choke. Let's see, here's a face crank. It's across the jaw. That doesn't make it a face crank. Face crank is about torque. 150 of the third. Nurdanbeke, pretty good. I think he won the first, but used a fair amount of energy, a lot of control, but not a lot of offense. Costa, still fairly long for the division. Just kept a decent pace and kept kind of punishing him. Then third round, able to get the back, get the choke. Costa's pretty good. I don't know what his ceiling is exactly. He doesn't jump off the page at me as like, boom, big guy you must pay attention to, but he's definitely going to be he's going to hand some pretty decent fighters, especially lower-ish level guys, some losses at featherweight. Nurdanbeke, not a world beater, but a fairly solid test at a bare minimum. And kicking everything off, Josephine Knudsen defeated Julia Polastri via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. A lot of Muay Thai striking for a bit. Knudsen just getting the better of that. Polastri remembered she could grapple at some point in the third round. Did a little bit of grappling in the second, but too little too late at the end. And then third, she was able to do a bit more with it, win the round. But, this one bothered me. I should have known that one. But live and learn. Yeah, that was the card. So I mentioned we lost a couple of fights, so they spent like 30 minutes at the top of the broadcast just having to preview and vamp a little bit before we got to the first fight. Um, yeah, this was not a very good card. Just not a very good card. I wish I had something more positive to say. Your bonuses were given to, I mentioned already, Fight of the Night to Fernandez and Judice. And performances went to Tatsuro Taira and Brady Heastand. Might have. I, okay, so if I was doing this, just for the record, Fight of the Night would have been Heastead and Armfield. Taira would have got a performance, and I think I would have thrown one the way of Weston Wilson. Because triangle arm bars are cool. That's it. That's all my logic there. But I'm not in charge of that. They are, and that's how that went down. Not a very good card. Read my live report for MMAZone411mania.com. As always, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Kind of surprised that took me that I'm 40 minutes in doing that. I did not. I thought I might have been able to get through that even quicker, but I even on stuff that I don't really care for, I try very hard not to be like dismissive or insulting unless the fight really sucks. So that was the card. All right, moving on because there's another one coming up. UFC on ABC 6 coming your way. I believe prelims start at noon. Let me double check the start time on this one. Yeah, prelims for this upcoming fight will start at noon Eastern. As a minor disclaimer, I will not be covering this event live. I have a thing Saturday morning that's going to take basically the runtime of this event. Um, yeah, it starts at 9, and it is going to take minimum of 3 hours. I'm helping on a belt testing. I am not testing myself. My next test should be later this year. But they can take a while. So we're probably going to be 3-ish hours for that. And then, assuming passing, there will be celebratory stuff, which is fairly common. Just not going to be able to do it live. I will view it and write it up after the fact. Just if you're looking for it live, mea culpa. Um, I will not be able to do this one live, but I will have a full report for you, so be on the lookout for that. All right, so this card got a shift during the last week. The UFC event, the UFC they had a rough week. This sort of dovetails into one of the news items, but I may as well just talk briefly about it now. Um, when they had to change the main event here. This was originally they're in Saudi Arabia, as I already mentioned. Original main event was Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev. Chimaev has some kind of health issue. He's been in and out of the hospital. I don't know exactly what it is, but that guy. I'm trying not to speculate too much here because could be a lot of things. Really could. Understand that what I'm saying is just guesswork. I know he had a really bad bout of COVID because he was public with that. In fact, he almost retired. It was before Ramzan Kadyrov said, "No, you're not retiring." And if you live in that area or you have family in that area, you are not in a position to argue with Ramzan Kadyrov. And so Chimaev was able to kind of come back, had a couple of pretty good performances, but they're spaced out. Um, I think he had a weight miss at one point. He wound up fighting Kevin Holland. No, he fought. Didn't he fight Li Jingliang instead? Yeah, yeah. He was supposed to fight somebody else and then missed, and then there was the miss between Tony Ferguson and I think he was supposed to fight Li Jingliang. Khamzat was supposed to fight Nate Diaz, and yeah, a bunch of fights got shuffled around. But he's struggled to remain active and healthy, and whatever he's dealing with now, in and out of the hospital, I hope it's not. It seems to be a serious impediment and a threat to his athletic future. Hopefully not to his life. Um, but to whatever extent I get information, as a polemic, I will update you guys here when I can. But he's out, and on a week's notice, the UFC, 2 weeks basically, week and a half, the UFC had to find a replacement for Robert Whittaker. And as you can well imagine, a lot of people said no. And I don't blame them. Look, if you're not actively in training camp, to get a call, like they called Sean Strickland, they called Kamaru Usman, I'm sure other people too. And if you're not actively training and actually preparing for a fight, being told, hey, cut weight, fly to Saudi Arabia, not really with enough time to get acclimated, so you might be jet lagged. Cut weight when you haven't necessarily been preparing to cut weight, and preparing to cut weight is a whole thing before you do the actual cut. And then, by the way, fight Robert Whittaker. No, I'm not going to do that. That's terrible. That's genuinely terrible. So, a lot of people said no to that, I imagine. They've said publicly, like Strickland and Usman. My hunch is a lot more than just those two. So, ultimately, they scrapped Alaskarov from the card that just took place. He was supposed to fight on that one. Originally, it was against Andre Muniz. That got switched when Muniz got injured to Tricoli. Then he got moved over here. Also, credit to Robert Whittaker accepting that change of opponent. Chimaev, I liked Whittaker's chances against Chimaev. Um, I'm not saying I don't like his chances against Alaskarov, but I know Chimaev beat Alaskarov when they fought, but I actually think Alaskarov's the better fighter at this point in time. Um, in many respects, a very different set of problems. If you got to fight Chimaev for 5 rounds, you just kind of accept you're going to have to deal with an early attack, be defensively sound, make him work, and then up the tempo as the fight goes on. And if you're Robert Whittaker, you've been doing that forever. Alaskarov, very different set of problems. Not nearly the, bat out of hell that Chimaev is, tactically. Um, so, yeah, this guy, what else fell out on this card? This card's had some issues. We were supposed to get Shadow Magomedov and Ihor Potieria. Potieria fell out, and he's been replaced. Said Nurmagomedov was supposed to fight here. That fell out. Then Farid Basharat was going to replace him, and then he fell out. We were supposed to get Abu Azaitar and Dennis Talulin. Azaitar was replaced. There's still a lot of the regional, like Dagestan Russian, but like Muslim Russian, has a very heavy presence on this card. Or the Caucasus region. And because that's that's a predominantly Muslim area, they tend to play fairly well in areas of the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia. Well, this is the UFC's first trip to Saudi Arabia, but they played well in like Abu Dhabi and what was the other one? Oh, it's the other Middle Eastern place they've been going. They've been to places other than Abu Dhabi, haven't they? I don't know. I think they have, but I can't remember it off the top of my head, so forgive me. But that that all lets them play. They play baby faces for this region, and there's a lot of that referenced on set up here. We have some of the Tajikistani guys. Um, we have in the Dagestani Russian Federation Muslim guys. We actually have a few just more regular Russians, more Slavic Russians, because Russia tends to divide itself into slightly different, like along ethnic lines, rather than because everyone is very definitively Russian. But Eastern Orthodox Slavic Russians are not are a different group than the Dagestani Muslim, the Caucasus region Muslim Russians. But there's a fair amount of that region and whatnot being referenced here, and when it comes to the fight, Whitaker and Alaskarov, I think Alaskarov is going to give Robert Whitaker some headaches. Alaskarov is very, very difficult to take down. Whitaker has been incorporating a bit more wrestling recently, especially as a surprise element. Um, Alaskarov's a former combat sambo or just regular sambo. Forgive me, I forget which one, but former world champion in one of the sambo derivations. Yeah, combat sambo. Okay. Multiple time gold. Only one time at the. There's a few different sanctioning bodies, but gold medalist at the World Cup a couple of times, World Championships, at different groups World Championships. Um, it's very, very good. I mean, his only loss professionally was to Khamzat Shemaev, and Shemaev has taken everyone down he's fought, like both regionally and in the UFC, except for Alaskarov. He could not get that man down. Alaskarov gave Shemaev some fits before Shemaev caught him with that uppercut. Thus far in the UFC, Alaskarov has been pretty good, but this is his wins in the UFC over Phil Hawes and Warley Alves, and I'm not trying to disparage those gentlemen, but they are not Robert Whitaker. Very few people in that division are Robert Whitaker, or the level of Robert Whitaker. Uh, on a full camp dedicated to fighting Whitaker, I would give Alaskarov more of a chance. I'm not saying he can't win this fight. Um, my hunch is the odds are with Whitaker. Let me double check that. Yeah, they are, but not by a lot. The odds are giving Alaskarov, I think, the respect he is due. Um, I'm still picking Whitaker, but as mentioned previously, I think he had better chances against Shemaev. I think Alaskarov is a better fighter at this point, certainly at this point in their careers. There's a bit more evidence on hand supporting Alaskarov's case. Still think Whitaker wins. 5 rounds when you haven't necessarily been preparing for 5 rounds is a big deal. Whitaker's experience is a big deal, but Whitaker's also been through it, man. I mean, my respect for Robert Whitaker is fairly well documented at this point. He's only 33, and this is middleweight, but that man has been in some. He's been in some serious fights, and for the most part, he's won. But he's been in a couple of those really tough fights. I mean, he rebounded well enough after losing to Duplessis when he beat Costa, but it is going. time catches up to everybody. I don't think it'll catch up to him here, but be on the lookout. Be on the lookout for this one. If you don't mind losing when you gamble, if you want to bet an underdog, Alaskarov is not the worst underdog bet on this card. Co-main event, another one where I actually don't hate the underdog status if you're looking at value. Sergey Pavlovich, I believe fresh off of his loss to Tom Aspinall. Um, yeah. He's fighting Alexander Volkov. Now, Volkov's a guy that I've thought highly of. Volkov's been... He Ezekiel choked Taituivasa. Oh, that was funny. That was so funny. On a 3-fight winning streak. His last 2 losses are to Cyril Gahn and Tom Aspinall. No shame in either of those. And current 3-fight winning streak, all of those finishes over Jarzinho, Rosenstruik, Alexander Romanov, and Taituivasa. Interesting clash here. Pavlovich has really long arms. He's got one of the longer reaches. I think for like 86 inches of reach. 84, excuse me. Which is just nuts. Like that's not the longest in UFC history, but the man's ape index is up there. I mean, I think that's an insult. It's an actual measurement index. Just if you pause and went, wait, what? That's a real thing. I promise. It's like Mohs scale of hardness. People kind of look at you sideways if they don't understand. You know, the scale of hardness of minerals in particular. It's on the Mohs scale of hardness. It's like talc to diamond. Would be the 2 extremes from soft to hard. If memory serves me, at least. I'm doing that off of like recollections from high school earth science, high school science classes. But Pavlovich, he's got serious power. He's pretty good about finding the chin. He's just a little bit defensively vulnerable. Volkov, he's had some chin issues. Now it's heavyweight, so that's not the end of the world. It can be exacerbated, but it's not like, oh no, Derek Lewis knocked you out. You must not have a good chin. No, Derek Lewis hits really hard. We're going to get a lot of striking from these two. I can see either guy winning this. Volkov's only 35, but man's got 47 fights, and he's been doing this since '09. So, 15 years? A little over 15, actually. Little over 15 if you do the actual math. Volkov's, again, his chin can be touched. A lot of his defense is kind of tall man defense, and that's worked on the past, but when it doesn't work, it really doesn't work. He's actually one of the rare, like, tall guys who's also good in the pocket. He's got really good, like, if he's in close, he's got a good tight hook game. Giving up reach as mentioned, but he's 6'7". I mean, Pavlovich is no slouch. He's like 6'3". 4 inches of reach versus 4 inches of height. Pavlovich's run up until he fought for the interim belt was really solid. His power is just nothing. He's not the hardest puncher in the division, I don't think. Maybe in the UFC's heavyweight division, he might be the hardest, like, one-punch guy they've got at the moment. But Volkov's more technical, and that frequently bears fruit. Odds are with Pavlovich. Pavlovich not as shop-worn. I mean, both guys have had fairly long careers. Pavlovich has 20 fights, which is also, a fair amount. He's been doing this it'll be 10 years in December, so neither of these guys are, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Mm. Another close one in my estimation. Odds are with Pavlovich at about 2-1. Looks like most places. I don't know if I like him that much, if I were doing the odds, but uh, all right, let me go with Pavlovich. But I might change my mind on that one. Let me asterisk that. I reserve the right to any time before the fight starts change my mind on that one because I gotta do a little bit of tape study on both those guys. Welterweights: Kelvin Gastelum and Daniel Rodriguez. This should be fine enough. Both guys southpaw. Gastelum back at welterweight. Bit of a rough stretch recently. What, 2-6 in his last 8? Now, some of those losses, the interim title fight with Adesanya, split decision with Darren Till. That no, I don't think you could argue. I think Till won that fair and square. Jack Hermanson heel hooked him, then lost to Robert Whittaker. It was a pretty good fight though. Lost to Jared Cannonier, beat Chris Curtis, but probably shouldn't have if the headbutt had been called properly. Then Sean Brady kind of just ran him over. It was really surprising. But Rodriguez, 37, out of action for a little over a year. I got kind of a soft spot for Rodriguez, but there's a lot about this stylistically that I think favors Gastelum. Rodriguez likes to just strike. Gastelum will oblige him in a lot of that, but Gastelum's got thudding power and a very good chin. So I think I'm going to lean Gastelum here. But for whatever my rooting interest might be, I actually kind of am pulling for Rodriguez, but I think Rodriguez pushing 40 might have seen his best days already. And I can't keep pretending that's not a thing. Pretty good fight here at featherweight, actually. Muhammad Naimov and Melsik Bagdasaryan. Naimov, 3-0 in the UFC, wins over Jamie Malarkey. Nathaniel Wood, that was... I don't remember if I think I picked him to do that, but beating Nathaniel Wood is no mean feat. Then that weird leg injury to Eric Silva in that fight. I mean, I think he was doing okay anyway, but... on the other hand, we have Melsik Bagdasaryan, who is still with... You want to know how I'm going to pick this one? He's still fighting with Edmund Tarverdian. Now, he actually did... Oh, Lutz gave him... Even Tucker Lutz gave him some problems. Like, this is the thing about guys out of the Glendale Fight Club. Said it before. Their natural ability will carry them places. But once they have to actually continue to grow their game or adjust and adapt after some tapes on them, Tarverdian is just not equipped as a coach to help them in that respect. And I do not believe that Bagdasaryan is out of this fight, but he's at the point in his career where I don't pick guys from that camp after their like fourth or fifth fight in the UFC if it's been demonstrated that people have kind of figured them out. And Lutz gave him problems even in a fight that Bagdasaryan ultimately won. So going with Naimov. Then kicking off the main card, we have light heavyweights for some reason. Johnny Walker and Volkan Oezdemir. The Ooze Man beat Bogdan Gushkov his last time out. That was September of last year. Overall, 2-3 in his last 5. Losses to Yuri Prochazka, Magomed Ankalaev, and Nikita Krylov. Walker, who I still just could not for the life of me get a handle on. Had the no contest with Magomed Ankalaev, then they rebooked that, and Ankalaev stopped him in the second round. Had a 3-fight winning streak before that. Iwan Kutalaba, Paul Craig, and Anthony Smith. None of that was necessarily like stand out. A couple of those he was very heavily like supposed to win, and then beating Anthony Smith at this point, it's still, obviously better than losing, but Smith's persistence I think is admirable, though his retaining his spot in that division where it is right now is an indictment on the division. I said Walker's a lot bigger than Oezdemir. Walker's like 6'5", 82 inches of reach. Oezdemir is only 6'1", 75 inches of reach. Hang on, wait, 75, 82. I always feel bad picking Johnny Walker. I do. Because he's so unreliable. Then again, it's not like Oezdemir is some bastion of consistency either. All right. I'm going to go against. This is a pick 'em according to the odds, or very close enough to it. Somewhat against my conventional wisdom, I'm going to go with Walker. Been a long time since I did that, but I don't know how Oezdemir's going to handle a guy that much bigger than him. Like if the physical dimensions were even just like 2 inches closer, both directions, like height and reach, I would go Oezdemir, but I can't do it. All right, on the prelims, I mentioned already that Shara Butin or Shara Bullet Magomedov supposed to fight Ihor Potieria. Potieria got pulled to fight Michel Pereira at UFC 301 when he was wildly overmatched because Pereira is actually kind of a beast at middleweight. In steps a newcomer, Joelton Luderbach. Where is this gentleman from? I need to know how to at least make an attempt to pronounce this guy's name. What did this one fall out to? No, it should be listed. Okay, hang on. Sorry, that's the wrong guy. There you are. Okay, he is Brazilian. Let's see, 38-10, so he's been doing the darn thing. 4-fight winning streak. 38-10, won no contest. Been bouncing around a few different. He's been done some modified rules kickboxing. Spent some time in karate combat. Yeah, that dude's been around. Jeez. Okay, hang on. Let me try to sort out his just MMA career from this list. Dropped a split decision to Clay Collard in the PFL and won to Hausman Fio. Hasn't lost since then. Okay. Not a scrub. Not a scrub at all. Still think this is probably Magomedov. But Magomedov's grappling was a pretty big target. He struggled with that in his UFC. I mean, he still pulled it out, but some of his game did not look ready for prime time. And Luderbach might be able to take advantage of that. Still going to go with Magomedov. I feel like this is more like deliberate matchmaking. But if he hasn't shored up that takedown defense, he could absolutely be on the wrong end of this one. Lightweight, Nasrat Haqparast and Jared Gordon. Not actually a terrible fight. This is, you know what, this is not a bad card. Like, it's got a lot of regional flair and a lot of somewhat regionally favored matchmaking, but none of this looks like none of these I think are booked to be squash matches. Anyway, Haqparast, 3-fight winning streak. He had a rough couple of fights against Dan Hooker and Bobby Green, but three in a row since then. McDessie, Quinones, and Malarkey. In fact, he stopped Malarkey for his first stoppage win since 2019. And Jared Gordon, 35, double tough, veteran. Had that loss to Paddy Pimblett that he should have won. The no contest with Bobby Green. Then he stopped Mark Madsen. It's actually a pretty solid fight. I feel like it's Haqparast. Well, the odds are more than 2-1 for Haqparast. I don't like him that much, but in fact, am I gonna pick Gordon? It'd be a little bit sentimental. Be a little bit sentimental if you picked him. Haqparast has done pretty good thus far. He's only 28. Gordon's what, 35? That's a non-trivial 7 years. I actually am going to go with Haqparast. I think he's going to keep the momentum going, but you sleep on Jared Gordon in that fight at your peril. Just going to phrase it like that. Welterweights. Decent enough little fight here also. Rinat Fakhretdinov and Nicholas Dalby. Fakhretdinov fought to a draw with Elijah Zaleski dos Santos his last time out, which I think was a fair ruling there. Been fairly impressed with Fakhretdinov. And Dalby is just this guy is a rock solid fighter. 4-fight winning streak. Good clinch game, good pace overall. The 4-fight winning streak is Claudio Silva, Warley Alves, Muslim Salikov, and then Gabriel Bonfim. The Bonfim win was a pretty decent upset that a lot of people were sleeping on him to pull off. I still think I'm going to pick Fakhretdinov. If Dalby can spend a lot of time defensively against the fence, he'll be okay. But Fakhretdinov has actually pretty decent open space wrestling. I'm going to go with him. Once again, the odds are wide. 3-1 for Fakhretdinov. I'm going to say that one again. That's asking for trouble. Dalby is much better than that. Still picking Fakhretdinov, but in fact, am I spelling that guy's name correctly? Fakhretdinov. Fakhret. Yeah, hey, look at me. Pulled that one off. Bantamweights, Kyung Ho Kong and Muin Ghafarov. Mr. Perfect, Kyung Ho Kong. I think she might have changed him to Typhoon. Coming off a loss to John Castaneda. 1-2 before that. I kind of like Kong. He's a nice guy to have around, but I actually Ghafarov 18-6. I think he's what 2-0 in the UFC. 0-2. He's the Tajik guy who's been struggling. I mean, his second fight was against Said Nurmagomedov. Like, that was always going to be rough. I might still pick him here, actually. Okay, you know a few of these regional, the kind of regional guys are going to lose on this card. Not all of them, but some of them are going to drop at some point. And Kong, Kong might do it. You know, Kong, he's a good. I said he's solid, but he's 36. He's just been around for a while. I mean, he came into the UFC in 13, and his had a long layoff between 2014 and 2018. I mean, he had his mandatory military service, I believe, during that time. Um, do I just go with the odds here? Gafarov will get after it, and Kong can be flustered. All right, yeah, I'll go with the odds, but I don't feel. Let me asterisk that one too. Ah, there we go. That's another one that I'm gonna reserve the right to change my mind. Light heavyweight Magomed uh, Gadziasulov and Brenson Hiberio. Um, I'm probably butchering this. Is that the Bahrainian flag? It is. So Gadziasulov. Yasulov. So that's my best guess. I'll have to wait until I hear it pronounced. But Gadziasulov, 8-0. Fairly junior to be here. Contender Series win. Pretty good. Fairly long amateur career, actually. Again, coming off a Contender Series win. Okay. Hiberio, 15-6. Won no contest in there for good measure. Lost his UFC debut to uh, Zhang Mingyang, or Mingyang Zhang if you wanted to westernize it. Hmm. That's a weird one. The experience edge pretty clearly with Hiberio there, but I wonder if they're not trying to set up Gadziasulov. Odds really like that. They're reading the tea leaves on that one with Gadziasulov. 8-0 though. I'm not going to reserve the right to change my mind on this one. This is one of those ones I'm going to have to take kind of a flyer on. All right. I will go with the odds. But this is another one where the guy that the crowd's going to be behind could very well come up on the wrong end of this. Gadzhiy. Hiyasulov. Okay. That's kind of a mouthful. All right, and not quite kicking everything off. The Bantamweight Road to UFC Season 2 tournament finals will take place. We have Xiaolong and Lee Chong, Lee Chong Ho. What's up, Chong Ho Lee? Because that has not been properly listed there. Um, okay, so Xiaolong, or again, it would be properly like the Chinese version would be Long Xiao, because Long is the family name, I believe there. So Long is 26-8, 4-fight winning streak. Two of those are decisions on the road to UFC events. Lost to Christian Quinones on the Contender Series in 2021. And Lee 9-1. So an experience edge in one place. 3-fight winning streak. What, two of those are going to be road? Yeah, two road to UFC events. One other regional. Hmm. Not terribly familiar with these two gentlemen. Where are the odds? Odds are with Long. Hmm. You know what? I will respect it. Um, I will respect the odds, and I'll go with Long. But if you're looking for an underdog bet, something that close between in these kind of fights, um, a lot of the odds tend to overvalue some of these like tournament performances. This fight's already been made and fallen out twice, so a lot of room for improvement from Lee. And somewhere on the card we'll have Cedricus Dumas and Dennis Tululin. I have to imagine this is loser leaves town for these two gentlemen. Tululin 11-9, 3-fight losing streak, only 1-4 in the UFC. And Dumas 9-2, 2-2 in the UFC. He beat Abu Azaitar, which was kind of funny because he was like, not very clearly not supposed to win that fight, and he did. I don't know that I picked Tululin to win fights at this point. I think this is Dumas. All right, and those are my predictions. Two that I'm reserving the right to change my mind on, that being Gafurov and Pavlovich. But other than that, that's what we're going to go with. And yeah, once again, not going to be able to cover that live, but I will watch and write up the event. So I appreciate you guys understanding some of my circumstances with that. Okay, moving on. UFC has had some fights get shaken up. I mentioned already they had same. So last week I mentioned the UFC canceled their press conference for McGregor and Chandler, and it felt like there was some lack of optimism around that fight happening. They withdrew UFC 303 from being advertised as pay-per-view. Then things changed. They felt a little better. They threw some commercials for it up. Back to this week, and a lot of reporting coming out from different people, including. It's not that I don't appreciate Ariel Helwani being a little bit short-tempered with how people do not understand how media works, but his kind of like slightly angrier phase that he's in is weird, amusing at times and a little bit weird. So he was one of the ones who kind of said at first, like, something's up. There's not a lot of confidence in that fight happening at UFC 303. And people accused him of drawing this out. Like, do you guys not know how this works? If he's told stuff off the record, he can express that he has some information, but can't necessarily go into details. And especially if we're talking like injury specifics, there's some stuff that like you can tiptoe with some very dicey legal areas if you reveal that stuff against someone's wishes. Especially if you're like third party. If you're uh, uh, there's some different understandings and maybe some different rules for like sports athletes in particular. Like your team might have the rights to release information or even an obligation to release information. But so that's a whole other thing. But just people being kind of pissy about this. Like the UFC hasn't said anything. Of course, it's still on because we've largely driven out legitimate journalism from the MMA space. It's all, Nina drama, the schmo, or internet personalities who don't who are interested in generating bizarre content rather than the work of journalism. And that's a shift that MMA I think is going to regret that we've been making. And I certainly regret it. To whatever extent I contributed to it, and I don't think it was much because I don't consume the gimmicky stuff. I'm not interested. Never seen the Nina drama video. I know who she is. Never seen a schmo interview, though I appreciate that he's doing a gimmick. Know who he is. Never watched a minute of his content. There's a lot of guys doing that kind of stuff that there's an audience for it. Bless them. Do what you have to do. I don't regret that some of those people exist. I regret that that's all we have. So eventually, and other people in the space were speculating, like, what's going on here? Um, I personally, I felt it was fairly obviously the wrong word. I don't think it was too big of a leap to say there was some kind of an injury to Conor. There was a question about whether or not he could rehab quickly and then fight through it to make the scheduled date. Turned out he couldn't. And there were a lot of people doing well, there's no reason for this not to be made available. Whatever happened to him is not a medical mystery. I think it's Luke Thomas making this point. And this was from Morning Combat, and I think Brian Campbell had the right of it, but he was not articulating the point that he was trying to make the best way. So let me try and phrase why I arrived at the conclusions I did, given the information. I didn't speculate a whole lot here because I don't know. I try not to as a general rule. There's sometimes, and if I do, I just state. I mean, look, I don't have sources. I don't talk to people. I do a lot of polemicism. But part of what again Luke Thomas's point was like there's no mystery about what's wrong with him. There's no orthopedic or kind of injury that takes days and days and days to diagnose. That's true. The problem is like a major sports league will announce these things very quickly. And there are some like responsibilities built into what they do that encourage that. The UFC doesn't have those. I think if there was an error in sort of Luke's reasoning, because he speculated that there might have been a pay discrepancy, because that event, UFC 303, set to be like a $20 million gate. And it would not be out of character for Conor to have started going, hey, I would like a piece of the gate money, which the UFC has never given to any fighter. And that there might have been some, again, financial negotiations going on, and that was creating some conflict behind the scenes. I don't think that's an unreasonable conclusion. If part of why you got off of injury was the assumption that a normal system would have disclosed the particulars of this injury in a timely manner, the MMA space and the UFC does not operate under normal sports paradigms. Now, with hindsight, it's very obvious that what happened was Conor got injured, and the bulk of the delays were the UFC wanting to have a replacement main event listed before announcing that Conor was out because, in no small part, they're in Nevada for this. There is a clause in Nevada where if the main event of your fight, of your promoted card, falls out, you are legally required to offer refunds on your tickets. Now, what we wind up getting for UFC 303 is actually a better card. But If all they'd said was Conor is out, we're working on it, the refunds would have been through the roof. Because whatever replaces that is not going to command as high a ticket price as what they were charging for Conor McGregor's return. And I think the new UFC 303 card is better, but I don't think you can charge the same price as you were charging for Conor. But if you come out and say Conor's out, here's the replacement main event, the subtext being, please, 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 some of you have booked travel, some of you have bought tickets, please don't refund. That looks bad for us. We're still giving you something that's nice and shiny. Isn't this nice and shiny? And that's why they did what they did. And I understand it pragmatically. I don't know that I've seen a lot of people especially in the talking head space for the UFC have started to arrive at the point where if the UFC is going to continue utilizing Bush League tactics when you're on ESPN are one of the major sport events in the world, like you should be better than this. You should be behaving under a more organized sports paradigm. And I don't wholly disagree with that. So we lost that fight for now. I don't think a lot of reports indicate the injury is not that serious, and there's some logic behind this as well. If this were a serious injury that we're going to force Conor out for months and months, like if this were an ACL injury, right? A tear. That's surgery, that's, 9 months, a year, whatever it happens to be. The fact that they've just said nebulous injury, and some of the rumblings, I think Helwani mentioned this, I think a few other people, that, Conor will probably be okay to go fairly soon, but they're probably going to wind up rebooking this not in July, but in more August. Excuse me, August or September. But there's some reason to be optimistic about Conor's recuperative timetable to be even in, like, theoretically could have been in July. So whatever happened, it's serious enough to keep him from fighting. I guess not serious enough to require surgery, my hunch. And if it's a serious injury that's like long-term recovery, they tend to be more forthcoming with details. Minor injuries tend to get just, it's an injury, and then details emerge potentially as they emerge. But especially if there's not going to be a surgical recovery period, the other reason they're not going to say Conor, sprained his MCL, or Conor's ankle, he rolled his ankle and can't fight on it. Then Conor can claim his foot was a balloon again. You don't want to reveal some of those details because by the time the fight does roll around, they might be healed enough to fight, but could still be a point of attack. There's a lot of weird stuff like that goes on. So the fighters are actually at odds with some of the other people who desire. Because if you're a gambler, you want all the specifics that you can get about physical health. If you're a fighter, you desperately don't want that getting out. So odds, friction. Um, so anyway, that fight off. New main event on 2 weeks' notice for the light heavyweight title. Alex Pereira and Yuri Prochazka in a rematch. These two were largely, it was, being kind of quietly talked about in public that they were looking at these two to main event the upcoming Perth card. And both men seemed amenable to whatever. I hope both guys got a non-trivial bonus for doing this. Putting your belt on the line without a real training camp on this kind of notice and having to make weight. Pereira's the man. Like, this guy has had the wildest time in the UFC because he hasn't even been here for like 2 years. And he's fought Izzy twice, stopped him once, got knocked out, moved up in weight, beat a former champion, became a champion, and defended the belt against another former champion. And now he's rematching Yuri Prochazka, and these two, the The insanity of these two maniacs meshes perfectly. I kind of hope Yuri wins, not because I dislike Pereira, but if Yuri wins, we get they'll do an immediate rematch and we'll get a trilogy out of this. And I want those two psychos to fight. Like, light heavyweight kind of sucks anyway as a division. Let's just let the two wild men go at it. Let's just have some fun with this. So that's your new main event. I said, bless both of those guys. Hope they got paid very well for that. Your new co-main event is a brand new fight been put together on short notice, and it's a very good fight. Brian Ortega and Diego Lopez. Very good fight. I actually don't know who I think is going to win that one. I think the best version of Brian Ortega probably wins that, but Lopez is a Tasmanian devil. And Ortega's tough. Both guys very, very well accomplished grapplers. Both guys have good MMA grappling. Both guys kind of willing to throw down. That's a very, very good fight. And we were supposed to get Jamal Hill and Carlos Ulberg. Jamal Hill has some knee issues. He's out. In steps Anthony Smith. That, kind of a lateral move in a lot of respects. If Smith fights there's actually some questions around some of Ulberg's game that Smith, depending on how he chooses to fight, might attack in Ulberg that Jamal Hill wouldn't. I still kind of favor Ulberg, but I do believe there are paths to victory for Anthony Smith there. But that's the new UFC 303. It's a better card. It's just a better card than what we originally got. We don't have a full bout order yet. And I apologize if this comes across as insensitive. Putting Mayra Buena Silva versus Macy Chiasson on that main card, please don't. That fight's probably going to suck. Women's bantamweight is just a very, very bad division right now. And I don't think that's I would rather watch Joe Pyfer and Marc-Andre Barrio. I think they're going to try and put that as the main event of the prelims, but I'd swap those. I'd let Swanson and Feely main event the prelims, put MBS and Chasson just below that. And then you keep, you might actually keep Ian Gary and MVP as your opener. And then put Pyfer and Barrio after that. But that's just me. I'm not in charge of any of that. But the main card for this event got considerably better. The stuff under that is still... 303 is still an overall solid card. There's a few of these that are a little bit... Yeah. I mean, we got Andrei Arlovsky still... Look, Andrei Arlovsky's going to keep fighting because he gets $250,000 each fight. So you know what? Why not? But we'll be previewing that card next week anyway, so full breakdown then. But yeah, does not look at all like it used to look. I mean, that fight with Jamal Hill and Ulberg was actually originally Jamal Hill and Khalil Roundtree, before Roundtree disclosed an unintentional doping issue. And he got replaced by Ulberg, then Hill fell out. So we started with two completely different guys than how that fight's going to look when it's all said and done. So that's that. I already mentioned, Kamzat falling out. So yeah, that's kind of where we are at the moment. Um, sorry, did not mean to. Something weird came across my feed there. Um, yeah, that's UFC 303 now, so we'll see how that goes. I think they announced the Denver card, main evented by Macy Barber and Rose Namajunas. That's fine. That's that's not a terribly strong card. It's okay, but it's not. I don't think that one's standing out all that much. You've seen the ESPN 60. We don't have a main event for yet. Because I don't think they're going to main event Brad Tavares and Jun Young Park. Um, much as I'm a fan of the Iron Turtle, I just don't think they're going to do that. So that, I believe, still needs a main event. And we'll see what they come up with. Yeah, that's just kind of where we are right now. Is there anything else? I talked about some of the, I talked about how that the next day, the ABC 7 card, the one that's in Abu Dhabi instead of Saudi Arabia. I talked about that previously when they announced a bunch of fights for it. I think that's it for fights being shifted around. Okay, let me check Twitter for anything crazy. If nothing crazy has happened while we've been recording, we will do plugs and get out of here. Nope, nothing new on Twitter related to MMA, so plugs. Um, this Monday, so probably when you're listening to this, statistically speaking at least, we will be on Damn You Hollywood. Well, we over on Damn You Hollywood. I will be there. We will be reviewing Inside Out 2. It's going to be myself, Mark Radulich, Alexis Haina, and Zachary Strobel. So tune in for if you're interested in my ramblings on movies and how that whole thing's going to go. Haven't seen it yet. We'll watch it before reviewing it, but most people seem happy with the movie. So see if I agree with that or not. Then WWE SmackDown on Friday. I actually missed SmackDown this last week because my power went out for 2.5 hours, running over that time period. And yeah, that was fun. Then UFC event on Saturday. Again, not live, but after the fact will be written up. So tune in for any and all of that. We will be back here next week to review UFC on ABC, 6, and preview UFC 303, which, boy, they pulled a rabbit out of their hat on that one. Let's just really hope nothing bad happens to any of those fights before that event takes place now. All right, that's going to do it for me. Thank you all very much again for listening. I appreciate the heck out of all of you. Stay safe out there. See you next week. And until then, continue to be well, be safe, and behave.